Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling a concept that it feels incredibly modern.
Oh, yeah.
It's something you hear all the time in like marketing meetings, or you see it splashed across magazine covers.
Or hashtagged everywhere.
Exactly. But it actually has these really deep roots that go way, way back to 18th century German philosophy. We are talking about the Zeitgeist.
It is a heavy word, literally. And I don't just mean how you say it.
It is heavy. It feels weighty, you know? And honestly, before we look at this massive stack of research, I mostly thought of it as just a fancy way of saying what's trending.
Right, like a fad.
Yeah. You know, like bell-bottoms were the zeitgeist of the 70s, or avocado toast was the zeitgeist of 2016.
And that is certainly how it's used today, colloquially. It's basically become a synonym for a fad. But the mission for this deep dive is to go much, much deeper.
Okay.
We want to explore this idea that the zeitgeist isn't just a list of trends or, a look back at fashion. We're looking at it as a potential invisible agent.
An agent.
Yes. A force that actually dictates how we think, how we act, maybe even who we vote for, all without us really realizing it.
See, that's where it gets a little spooky for me.
Yeah.
The idea that there is this force just pulling the strings. It sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory, but it's actually mainstream philosophy. So, okay, start with the basics. The word itself.
Right. It's German, a compound word.
Zeit and Geist.
Zeit meaning time and Geist meaning spirit or, ghost. So quite literally the spirit of the age.
Zeitgeist. I feel like I need to be wearing a turtleneck and holding a coffee to say it properly.
It does have that vibe for sure.
But the definition we have here describes it as the intellectual, cultural, ethical, and political climate of an era.
It's the atmosphere. It's like the water we're swimming in. And our source material highlights something fascinating right away. It's often described as an invisible agent or even a demon.
A demon.
Yeah, a demon that seems to dominate the characteristics of a period.
See, that's the part that really stood out. It makes it sound like we aren't actually making our own choices.
Right.
That this spirit of the age is the puppet master. Like we're just NPCs in a video game that was coded by the era we happen to live in.
And that is the central tension, really. It's the ultimate question we're going to explore today. Is history made by so-called great men? Individuals who grab the wheel and steer, or are those leaders just products of their time?
People who were just summoned by the zeitgeist because the world was ready for them.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate nature versus nurture debate, but like on a huge historical scale.
Precisely. We have a lot to get through. We're going to look at the etymology, which is surprisingly dramatic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then the sociology, which gets into how this spirit works on a subconscious level. And then we'll end up in Silicon Valley.
I love that.
To see how venture capitalists are literally betting millions of dollars on their ability to read this ghost.
From German philosophers to tech bros and fleece vests. I love it. Okay, let's jump in. Section 1, the origins of the ghost. Now, I always assumed this was a Hegel term.
Right. George W.F. Hegel. He's the big name that's always attached to it.
Yeah.
If you take a philosophy 101 class, they'll tell you Zeitgeist, that's Hegel. But here is where we get our first sort of aha moment.
Go on.
The term actually predates him.
Really?
Yes. It was popularized by two other figures, Johann Gottfried Herder and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe.
Good, like the Faust guy.
The very same. But to understand why they came up with this, you have to picture the scene. It's 1769. Herder is writing this critique called Kritische Wälder.
1769, so we are pre-French Revolution, pre-American Revolution.
Exactly. The world is just on the brink of massive change. The tectonic plates of history are shifting. And Herder is wrestling with, of all things, a translation problem.
The translation problem created this huge idea.
It really did. He's looking at this Latin phrase.
Which was?
Genius seculi. It translates to spirit of the century or guardian spirit of the age.
Okay, genius seculi. That sounds fine. A little dry, maybe, but why not just use that?
Because Latin was the language of the old guard. It was the language of the church, of the stuffy academics, the static past. Herder and Goethe were part of the Sturm und Drang movement, storm and stress. They wanted emotion, passion. They wanted something that felt raw and alive.
They wanted to capture the texture of reality, not just catalog it in some dead language.
Right. Genius seculi sounds like a statue in a museum. But Zeitgeist, you have to understand, Geist in German is this really tricky, powerful word. It isn't just spirit, like a ghost in a sheet.
So what else does it cover?
It covers mind, intellect, wit, morale, essence. It implies intelligence and, crucially, intent. So when Herder coined Zeitgeist, he wasn't just translating a word, he was making this radical claim that time itself has a mind.
Whoa.
That an era isn't just a calendar date, it's a living, breathing entity with its own personality.
That is. Yeah, that's much heavier than just what's trending on TikTok.
Much heavier. And it didn't stop there. Once they opened that door, these spirits started multiplying. You mentioned the family of spirits earlier.
Yeah, the notes mentioned Volksgeist and Weltgeist.
Right. Let's break those down because they explain a lot about how we still see the world. Volksgeist is the national spirit.
Which, I have to say, sounds a little dangerous politically.
It certainly can be, and it has been misused, absolutely. But originally for Herder, it was an attempt to explain distinct cultural flavors. You know, why does French poetry feel so different than German engineering? Why does Italian opera hit you differently than English theater?
Okay.
Herder argued it's the Volksgeist, the collective personality of a people.
So you have the spirit of the nation, the Volksgeist, and then you have the Weltgeist.
The world spirit. That's the big one. This is the idea that there is a unified spirit of all humanity, and it's moving towards some kind of goal.
They were really obsessed with categorizing these invisible forces. It's like they were trying to draw a map of the wind.
That's a beautiful way to put it. They were trying to explain why people in different eras or different places seem to think and act so differently. The idea was that our thoughts and our actions aren't just shaped by, timeless truths or our own individual genius.
They're shaped by the social environment of the time.
Exactly. It's the climate. That analogy is perfect. You can't grow palm trees in the Arctic. The climate dictates what can flourish.
Right.
And this brings us back to that demon concept. Because in the 18th and 19th centuries, this wasn't just a passive backdrop. It was seen as a dominating force, an invisible agent.
So it suggests that if you're living in a certain time, the zeitgeist is actively pushing on you. It's prescribing what is acceptable, what is tasteful.
What is considered true for that specific window of time.
Which feels a lot like peer pressure.
Yeah.
But on a massive societal level. It's not just your friends telling you what to wear. It's the entire universe telling you what to think.
In a way, yes. And that segues perfectly into how sociologists look at this today. We move from the philosophical demon, which feels a bit magical, a bit spooky, to the sociological construct.
So let's get into that. Section 2. Sociology and the vibe of an era. How do modern sociologists define this? Because I'm guessing they aren't talking about literal ghosts haunting the library.
No, not quite. In sociology and cultural history, the zeitgeist is defined as a diffuse system. It's a system of ideas, of images, of values that underpins how we behave.
And the key part here, from what I read, is that it's only partly conscious to us.
That is the critical distinction. We're doing things, buying things, believing things, and we think we're doing it because we just, decided to. We think, I chose this career because I like it, or I chose this outfit because it expresses me.
But the sociological view is that we're actually doing it because the zeitgeist has made those things the default option.
It reminds me of that iconic scene in The Devil Wears Prada. You know the one I mean?
Oh, the blue sweater?
The cerulean sweater, yes.
Right. Anne Hathaway thinks she just picked some random blue sweater out of a bin. But Meryl Streep just dismantles her.
She does. She breaks down how that color was in a collection by Oscar de la Renta, then it was in the magazines, then the department stores, and then finally the discount bin she found it in.
She thinks she made a choice, but the industry, the zeitgeist of fashion, made it for her years ago.
That is exactly the mechanism. It filters down and down until it just feels like common sense. The source material we have compares this to the Overton window.
Oh, I've heard of that. That's usually used in politics, isn't it? Like the range of policies a politician can talk about without sounding totally extreme.
Correct. Imagine a window frame. Inside the frame are ideas that are acceptable. Outside the frame are ideas that are radical or unthinkable or just insane. But the trick is the window moves.
Can you give us a concrete example, just to pin it down?
Sure. Think about smoking indoors. In, say, 1950, if you walked into an office and someone wasn't smoking, that might seem weird. The zeitgeist, the Overton window of behavior, said smoking at your desk was normal, professional, even relaxing.
And today, if you lit a cigarette in an office, you'd be escorted out by security.
Exactly. The window moved, the spirit of the age shifted on health, on public space. But if you apply that concept broadly, the zeitgeist is the Overton window for everything. Fashion, architecture, journalism, it dictates the pattern of fads that are considered tasteful.
So if you try to build a brutalist concrete building in an era where the zeitgeist is all about glass and light and eco-friendliness, you aren't just different.
You're wrong.
You're offending the spirit.
You are fighting the current. Now, we have to bring Max Weber in here. He's a giant of sociology. He viewed the zeitgeist as an ideal type.
An ideal type? That sounds positive, like the ideal man.
It's not a judgment of quality. It's more of an analytical tool. Weber knew that reality is messy. It's complex. There isn't actually one single spirit that everyone agrees on.
Of course not.
But to study history, we have to create a simplified model. We accentuate certain traits to make sense of the chaos.
So we say the 60s were about rebellion and peace, even though tons of people in the 60s were conservative and totally supported the war.
Exactly. We create a kind of caricature to help us understand the general vibe, but that leads to the major critique of the whole concept. The expert warning, you could say.
Yeah, what's the danger here? Because it seems like a useful shortcut.
The danger is that focusing on a single, unified spirit of the age can obscure the real social conflicts. It overlooks minority positions, dissident voices. It suggests a uniformity that never actually existed.
It erases the people who didn't fit the vibe.
It does. Defining a zeitgeist is always an act of interpretation. It's subjective. For one group, the spirit of the age might feel like liberation and progress. For another group, living in the exact same year, it might feel like oppression and decay.
So it's not a ghost that haunts everyone equally. It's more like a dominant narrative that we apply after the fact.
Precisely. But even with that critique, the concept is incredibly useful for understanding leadership. And this brings us to the main event, the title fight.
Section 3, the great debate, heroes versus the times. I love this. This is the philosophical cage match.
In one corner, we have the great man theory, and in the other, the Zeitgeist theory.
And representing the great man theory, we have Thomas Carlyle.
Thomas Carlyle, a Scottish philosopher with a very intense, almost religious view of history. His view is simple and, frankly, very appealing to our egos. He believed that history is just the result of the actions of heroes and geniuses.
Leaders are special. They're built different.
Yes. He stresses that leaders do not become leaders by accident. They possess specific innate characteristics, traits that grant them power. They shape the world. The world does not shape them.
It's the Steve Jobs view of history. One guy has a vision, he wears a black turtleneck, and he literally bends the universe to his will.
Precisely. Carlyle called these people lightning out of the cloud. He thought the rest of us, the rest of humanity, were just dry wood, waiting for the hero to come along and ignite us.
Lightning out of the cloud.
Yeah.
That's a powerful image.
But
I have to stop you there. I feel like we dismiss this idea too easily these days. I know the great man theory is out of fashion in academia.
it is.
We're supposed to look at systems and socioeconomics. But come on, you really think if Steve Jobs hadn't been born, we'd all be walking around with iPhones right now? Was the iPhone just inevitable?
That is the billion-dollar question, and it's exactly where the other side steps in to dismantle your argument.
Wow.
Representing the zeitgeist, we have Leo Tolstoy and, interestingly, our old friend Hegel.
Ah, Hegel's back.
Carlyle is largely reacting against the Hegelian view. Because Hegel didn't see these great men as independent operators at all. He saw them as vessels.
There's this quote in the notes about Napoleon that is just, it's amazing. Hegel saw Napoleon not just as a brilliant general, but as, how did it go?
The world's soul on horseback. Die Weltseele du Fer.
That is such a metal image. The world's soul on horseback.
It's poetic, for sure, but think about what it actually means. It's incredibly diminishing to Napoleon's individual ego. Hegel is basically saying that Napoleon was merely the embodiment of the world spirit. The forces of history, the zeitgeist, had built up so much pressure that it needed to be released. Napoleon was just the valve.
So if it wasn't him, it would have been someone else.
Someone else would have done it.
So you're saying if Steve Jobs wasn't born, some other guy, Steve Wobbs, would have invented the smartphone in 2007.
Hegel and Tolstoy would say yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Maybe not the specific design of the iPhone with the single button, but the general shift to mobile computing. The technology was there, the internet bandwidth was there, the consumer desire was building. The zeitgeist demanded it.
That is a very hard pill for the ego to swallow.
Tolstoy goes even further in War and Peace. He looks at Napoleon on the battlefield, and he doesn't see a god of war orchestrating some grand symphony. He sees a guy sitting on a horse, shouting orders that nobody can even hear because of the smoke and noise.
Right.
while the battle just chaotically unfolds based on a million tiny interactions between scared soldiers in the mud.
So Napoleon thinks he's steering the ship, but he's actually just riding the rapids.
Exactly. Tolstoy argued that kings and generals are actually the least free people in history.
How does that work? They're the ones giving all the orders.
Because they are the most constrained by the expectations of the moment. They are the focal point of the Zeitgeist. If Napoleon had decided not to invade Russia, the pressure of the French Empire would have found another release valve. Maybe a different general, maybe a different war. The event was inevitable. The man was interchangeable.
Okay, so we have two extremes. The hero who invents the future and the puppet who just acts it out.
And this brings us to the psychological parallels, the trade approach versus the situationist approach.
Right. The trade approach lines up with the great man theory. It says, let's look at the personality traits of leaders. Are they charismatic, bold, narcissistic? It assumes the magic is inside the person.
And the situationist approach argues that our behavior is a product of our society. Social influence determines what we do. A leader is just someone who happened to be in the right place when the social environment demanded a certain type of action.
It's the difference between saying he changed the world and the world was ready to change and he was just standing at the front of the line.
Exactly.
So who wins? Is it the hero or the ghost? Because I feel like both sides have a really strong point.
Well, as is so often the case in these deep dives, the answer isn't A or B, it's C. It's the synthesis.
The solution.
The interactional approach. And we actually have a formula for this from a social psychologist named Kurt Lewin.
I did not know there would be math today, but okay, lay it on me.
It's a beautifully simple equation, but it basically solves the whole debate. B equals FPE.
B equals FPE.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, decode that for me.
Behavior B is a function of the person, P, and the environment, E.
That actually makes perfect sense. It's so simple.
It's elegant, isn't it? You cannot separate the individual from their context. You need the specific traits of the person, the great man potential. But those traits only activate or succeed if the environment, the zeitgeist, is receptive to them.
So a Napoleon born in a peaceful, stable era might just end up being a really annoying, bossy middle manager.
Precisely. He has the drive, he has the ego, but the environment, E, gives him no outlet for conquest, so he just micromanages the quarterly reports.
And a Napoleon born in a chaotic revolutionary era without his strategic genius would just be another forgotten casualty. You need the match.
You need the lock and the key. This connects to Emile Durkheim, to modern social capital theory. We are embedded in this web of social forces. We bring our personality to that web, but the web limits and directs what we can do.
This feels like the perfect bridge to our final section. Because if there is one place on Earth that is obsessed with finding that perfect match between the person and the environment,
it's the world of startups.
Section 4, Zeitgeist in Silicon Valley.
It's fascinating that this high-minded German philosophy has made its way into VC pitch decks.
Right. You'd think they'd be quoting balance sheets, not Hegel.
But if you think about it, VCs are in the business of prediction. They are betting on the future. They use the concept of zeitgeist to understand why entire industries emerge when they do. They're looking for that simultaneous invention.
Which is when different people invent the same thing at the same time, totally independently.
Right. Think about the telephone. Bell and Gray filed patents on the exact same day. Think about calculus, Newton, and Leibniz.
Which suggests the spirit of the times was just ripe for it. It wasn't one lone genius. The knowledge was sort of floating in the air.
Malcolm Gladwell talks about this a lot in his book Outliers.
Oh, Outliers is a classic on this topic.
Gladwell argues that success so often comes from early personal or significant exposure to knowledge in a brand new industry.
It's all about timing.
It is. He proposes that the timing of your involvement when you were born, when you entered the workforce, it just drastically impacts your probability of success. It's not just about being smart. It's about being smart at the exact moment the wave is cresting.
If Bill Gates had been born 5 years later, he completely misses the personal computer revolution. If he's born 5 years earlier, he's probably too old to care.
Exactly. And the notes mention some huge Silicon Valley names here. Peter Thiel, Vinod Khosla, Max Levchin. They all seem to subscribe to this environmental view.
They do. They argue that innovation is shaped by the environment, specifically things like access to the internet, open source software, and global markets.
If you tried to build Facebook in 1990, you fail. Period. Not because the idea is bad, but because the infrastructure, the environment, it just wasn't there. The E in Lewin's equation was missing.
But there's a flip side. Peter Thiel has that very famous critique about our current zeitgeist. He said, there is so much incrementalism now.
Incrementalism. So just making tiny tweaks instead of big leaps.
Yeah. He basically says we were promised flying cars, and instead we got 140 characters.
His argument is that the current environment, the current E, is actually stifling true radical innovation. The spirit of the age has become risk-averse, or maybe just too focused on entertainment instead of real progress.
That's an interesting thought. So the zeitgeist can be a headwind just as easily as it can be a tailwind.
Absolutely. And investors are always looking for what they call a zeitgeist market.
What are the characteristics of a zeitgeist market?
Well, it's a market defined by the times. First, you see a huge number of new companies rushing in.
Like the AI boom right now. Every startup is an AI startup.
Or the dot-com boom. Perfect examples. Second, differentiation becomes really difficult. When everyone is chasing the same spirit, everyone's products start to look the same.
So let's get practical. I'm a VC. I'm looking at a zeitgeist market, let's say generative AI. The market is flooded. How do I actually pick a winner in all that noise?
You have to look for what the source calls differentiation through agency.
Agency. Define that for me in this context.
Okay. In a zeitgeist market, the core technology, the AI model, for instance, it becomes a commodity very, very quickly.
Right. Everyone has access to the same basic engine.
So if everyone is selling the same engine, the winner isn't the one with a little more horsepower. It's the one who makes the car easiest and most useful to drive.
So user experience, basically.
It's deeper than just a nice interface. Agency means the product acts on your behalf. Think about the dot-com boom. There were 1,000 places to buy pet food online.
Rest in peace, pets.com. The sock puppet was a legend.
A legend. But who won that war? Amazon. Not because they had better dog food, but because they bundled the whole experience. They handled the trust, the shipping, the returns, the credit card security. They took the agency of the transaction off your shoulders.
They solved the headache, not just the problem of an empty dog bowl.
They solved the headache. So if we apply that to AI, the winner probably won't be the model that writes the absolute best poem. It'll be the one that automatically integrates into my email, drafts the reply, checks my calendar, and hits send without me having to learn complex prompt engineering.
Bingo.
That is surfing the zeitgeist. You aren't fighting the wave of technology. You are building the surfboard that makes the wave navigable for the average person.
And that connects right back to what Peter Thiel was saying about incrementalism, doesn't it?
It does. Thiel's critique is that we've stopped looking for totally new waves. We're just polishing the surfboards we already have. But the true visionaries, the ones who perfectly combine the person and the environment, are the ones who see the wave long before it breaks.
This has been a wild ride.
Yeah.
We started with Herder translating Latin in 1769. We went to Napoleon on a horse, broke down the math of human behavior.
And ended up with VCs in Palo Alto trying to predict the next unicorn.
It really shows the power of a single concept. So let's wrap this up. What's the big takeaway?
For me, it's that the spirit of the age isn't a ghost. It's not magic. It is the context that makes individual action possible in the first place.
They're the P in Lewin's equation.
We are the P. We have our own traits, our own will, our own ideas. But we can't ignore the E, the environment. We are, as the sociologists say, structurally coupled with our times.
It's humbling, really. It takes the ego down a notch. You aren't just a genius in a vacuum. You are a genius because the world was ready for your specific kind of genius.
And that raises the final and maybe the most important question.
What's that?
If the sociologists are right and the zeitgeist is only partly conscious to us, if it really is the invisible water we're swimming in, what is the spirit we are living through right now that we are completely blind to?
Oh, that is going to keep me up tonight. What are we all doing today that people in 50 years will look back on and say, oh, that was so typically 2020s, and we don't even realize we're doing it?
That is the question. Is it our reliance on algorithms? Is it our hyper-individualism? Or maybe something we consider a great virtue today will be seen as our greatest flaw.
To everyone listening, we want you to look for the invisible forces shaping your own week. Are you making choices, or is the demon making them for you? Thanks for diving deep with us.
I'll see you next time.